you go ahead and start the recording, please?
Sure thing.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for taking the time for the June meeting of the board and officers. This is the agenda for today, same structure as last few times. A general update about the organizational statistics, KPIs, news, etc. for the section. Debrief from the last community call, a few other topics, summary in one slide. Then, update from the ongoing activities, the WIS, verification and validation, drill robotics, open source drilling community, university relations, and have a couple of proposals there for position papers we can discuss at that point. Then the events that we have coming up and conclusion. So these are the statistics from the website from SPE up to the end of May. You can see the, sorry, I don't know why it's my mouse. The bottom two graphs give the granular view of the memberships month by month. You can see where how we compare with last year and with the month before. So all in all, a healthy trend, both for professional members and for student members. I think we are in the order of 10% ahead of year over year, which I think is consistent also with other technical sections and with SPE as a whole. It shows a little bit, it reflects the industry, going through an upcycle. In any case, though, the headwinds are still here with us, like Robert said in the last call. Some universities here and in Europe are canceling their programs on petroleum altogether. Enrollment is down. So that is the reality that we are facing, and we need to keep our focus on engaging new students, new members, and from these different disciplines as well. The industry is changing, but it's not going away. All right. So,
hey, Demetrios, Robert has his hand up.
Sorry. Yeah, please.
Yeah, sorry, I was 10 seconds late. I was looking at the agenda slide, and I was wondering if you could go back to that second.
Yes.
Thank you. I was just wondering if there was any update on the strategies from the regions.
Gulf Coast, you mean, Robert?
All the regions. We've got five regional chairs.
Programs. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I haven't put the time in the. You mean from the program chairs for different? Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't allocated enough time here in the agenda, but if we have the people on the call, I would be glad to hear, what ideas or activities or interest, anything. Yeah.
I was just thinking that maybe I think the idea of those positions across the world was to come up with a strategy, and I was wondering if maybe the next meeting we can focus on what they're doing, everybody's doing around the world.
Okay, that's a good idea, I think.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, so continuing for the website, Edgar has been monitoring the statistics and the metrics, etc. So I don't have graphs this time, but this is really the summary of what Edgar provided. New visitors consistently outnumber the returning ones. I'm not sure if this is a good thing or a bad thing. It doesn't mean that people that come see it and then they don't come again. I don't think that's the conclusion. I prefer to read this as, the section being visible and new people checking it out. And it's up to us at that point with the content that we have and to keep them interested and have them come again and again. And we had the peak in March at the symposium, a lot of activity, a lot of discussion going on. Both April and May were lower than that, and we're trying to see with Maury and Edgar how else we can content we can add to the website to make it more interesting. So for now, we're trying to add regular updates from the work streams and the subcommittee chairs in addition to the bi-monthly calls that we have with the membership. So we'll see how that goes. And a positive development was that, you remember we had some issues at the beginning with the voting process online, that it had a hiccup and was not capturing correctly the names of the people that were voting. So that is resolved now. Thanks to Maury and Edgar for their work. And that is a good step forward, because we can have now a record instead of having emails of all the important decisions that the board and the officers are making for section matters. I don't know if you want to add something, Edgar, but I think that summarizes the traffic. Just the parenthesis here. There was a drilling advisory board, that Robin has every quarter. There was a meeting and a couple of other sections gave their update. We gave ours in Q1. And they presented the same issues, essentially, that we have in terms of the forums, the online forums being not very lively. All this is consistent with the survey that Mark conducted and the findings of that survey. So we are all on the same boat, essentially, all the technical sections, and we need to keep looking for new ways how to engage the members. It's a general observation is that like 10% of the people, or maybe even less, participate, and most of the visitors are there to watch and listen what's happening. So that's the reality on the ground, and we have to see how we can keep generating interest in the activities of the section. All right, so the financial part, I think we have Robert here online. Robert, if you don't mind, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. There's two tables here. One shows the balance of all of our accounts over several months. And we roughly had a $5,000 withdrawal across all accounts going from April to this meeting. That's reflected on the table called balance sheet. You can see the transactions that resulted in that $5,000 withdrawal in the cash flow table on the right. The big withdrawals were associated with the DWIZ workshop and the contributions made by 3 contributors. We also paid for the symposium live stream, which was fully funded through sponsorship. And those were offset by a sponsorship from Patterson UTI for the DSA roadmap account, and some expense there as well. Activity between April and now, we've submitted the year-end report to SPE for our accounts. And I believe the big potential commitment still is with robotics and the documentary at roughly $13,000 to come. And maybe Fred can highlight more on that at some point.
Robert, I have a question. So
yes.
I understand David Gibson has raised some funds for that documentary. Are those sponsorships already reflected in these tables, or that money is with David, so to speak?
We have not yet paid him. He found the contributions of the 13,000 that Robert is talking about, and when he's got something to show us, we'll pay him $13,000.
But so that 13,000 has already been deposited to the drill robotics account?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Fred. Next slide, Robert.
Yes. And I tried to put together a snapshot of the symposium, and I'm sure others can comment better than I can. It was well attended, 150 registrations, and I broke it into 2 tables just to kind of show everyone the current state This is not necessarily the final state, but it's very close. The first table is our DSATS accounts. Several here did a great job raising sponsorships for this event. And so those are listed in green. And we had the expense for the live streaming event as talked about in the previous slide. And then on the table to the far right, I've got the SPE accounts. So the 150 registrations generated about $10,000 in revenue. And the expenses SPE incurred are listed there in the right. We have 3 expenses associated with AV. I've talked with Greg, and we believe these will be covered by our AV credit or AV allowance of $5,000, and those add up to about $1,150. That leaves us with a remaining AV balance of somewhere around $3,800. And there's several here that we're still trying to get clarity on around security, signage, and staff time. These weren't traditionally charged to or taken out from the event. And so those could be also credited back. But if they're not, we are potentially getting a surplus from the event. That's the registration minus the expenses of around $1,900. So great. It was, to me, it was a great event. So
very good.
So combined surplus is somewhere on $14,000 to $15,000 between the two. Yeah.
And this is figure, right?
Yeah, this is the same figure with those 2 tables just combined. So we don't need to go into it unless there's questions.
I think we're good then. Thank you, Robert. So let's continue then with the debrief from the community call from last month. It was held on May 11, the second Thursday of every other month. We had about 40 people attending. There was a featured presentation by Loïc Coirot, who is working in the group of Mark Carrier for the DWIS interface workstream. Specifically, he focused on the downlink interface into DSATS. I think it was well received, the presentation, based on the feedback from several people, and it created some momentum to push that effort forward. So right now, I think the immediate next step is to put this work, this demo, this protocol interface, to integrate it with the Open Lab simulator that the Norse group has. And Loïc and Mark have started working with Benoit in Stavanger to put that downlink, to build the interface, basically, to integrate it into the simulator. So an advisor, any advisor that wants to issue a downlink, we will be able to send the command, and that now will go into the DCS that is on the other side and drive the Open Lab simulator. I'm not sure when we can see the demo. This integration just started. As you will see in one of the following slides, there is a separate demo that group is putting together for DWIS. I don't think we will have the downlink ready on time to be part of this demo on September 19. I'll give you the details in a second. So it's going to be some future date, but that work is going on. And thanks to Paul, we have 2-3 more technical presentations in the pipeline from Halliburton and Neighbors and others to give in the next 1 or 2 or 3 maybe community calls. I think that's kind of the highlight of those calls, to see what others are doing and to share knowledge And I'd like to invite everybody here, if you have a suggestion from your companies or from people you work with that you would like to present or you would like them to present, please get in contact and we can schedule. I think that is one of the things that people dial in for these community calls. So that's the summary for that. I don't need to spend more time on this. A few other updates summarized here in one slide. So the DNV charter was approved last month. Pradeep had a few comments. We had a discussion with him. Rodika, Pradeep and myself, we clarified, the scope of work, etc. So all that came to agreement. So the DNV subcommittee was formed and Rodika is leading. And she's going to give us an update later. There was an IADD workshop in Woodlands at the end of May. Eric gave an overview of the work going on in DWIS remotely, and we had John McPherson and Fred Florence physically present. John also gave a presentation, and Fred traveled from Austin. Thank you, Fred, for that, and to represent DSATS and participate in the panel. I don't know if you want to give us a little more detail on this, Fred, before we move to the next point.
I think it was a very good conference. The main focus from the International Association of Directional Drillers is to get a standard developed to better describe the BHA, so that you can use it for steering and also even for hydraulics. So instead of just having a record that says there's a drill collar in here that's this length and this ID OD, there's a stabilizer and maybe something else. The idea is to say what are the bending characteristics? What are the material characteristics? There's a lot more information that will fit into the steering models and the other models, and it truly fits into what DWIS is doing. And so we talked about how we could work together to share that information and get it into a publicly available format.
Very good. Are there any next steps from here in this front, Fred? What was the conclusion of the workshop?
The next action that I've taken is Jonathan Lightfoot's going to share his information, which is extensive, and we'll work that through the contextual data group within DWIS.
Okay, excellent, very good. Thank you, Fred. So then there, the third bullet. You remember a couple of meetings ago, John gave us a presentation about what is and what is not autonomous systems, so that that was internal here in the group and to the membership, but we think that it's a role of DSATS to help define what is what and avoid some of the confusion that is spread out there. And as the next step in that effort, there was an abstract submitted to the drilling conference for next year, going into a little bit more detail, basically about this definition, providing a clear definition, and hopefully this will be adopted by the industry and help, avoid some of the miscommunication that is happening now as a result of marketing claims, etc. So thanks to John for leading this effort. Deadline is today, I think, actually, if I'm not mistaken, and the abstract is in place, and now the work is to make if it gets accepted, put a complete paper together. And like Robert said, we submitted the annual status report to SPE, both, put the questionnaire survey with and the financial one. I can share this with anyone who likes to see that. There is no secret in there. All in all, I think the section is healthy in terms of membership, like we saw earlier, and the level of activity, the participation. Of course, always can get better, but I don't see any signs of trouble from my point of view, at least. So that's what I had here as a collection of items. Now we can go into the various activities and get an update for the different programs, etc. So the DWIS, which is, I think, the biggest ongoing activity right now, like I mentioned, there is a demo scheduled for September 19 up north. Eric is leading that effort, and you can see there on the graphic on the right side what the demo is about. So there is a simulator at the bottom, a simulator, Open Lab, which is the process, if you want, where we feed signals in and we get measurements out. On top of that, there is an ADCS system. It's not one of the commercial products. It's a layer that NORS is putting in place for different reasons, to avoid commercial issues, etc., but also to have a cleaner interface, if you want, from the advisors higher up down to the well or the simulator. And then that's the blue layer. On top of that, you have standard functionalities like all commercial ADCS systems, controllers, safety functions, fault detection, etc. The green layer, and higher up now you have parties, service companies, or anyone really who can come in with an advisor, a piece of software that can be used for ROP optimization, for steering control, for whole cleaning limits. There is no anything can be in there. Those are the gray boxes on top. So the big circle in the middle is the heart of the system, really, where it collects all the input from the advisors, compiles all the data and passes down to the process, and also makes data available to the advisors for them to do their calculation. And that, for the purposes of this demo, is the DD hub that the NORS team has developed. The objective of this demo is to show that the different advisors can coexist and they don't collide with one another, they don't create conflicts. The communication back and forth, sharing data is feasible to bring up, any latency, questions, etc. This is a platform that the purpose here is to bring up the right questions and help come up with the right answers and keep advancing the state of the art, the concept. And hopefully we will generate enough interest here and prove the benefits of these technologies so that companies that build ADCS systems or rig contractors or service companies will get more interested and get on board. And anything that is being developed here, the interfaces, the code, etc., is available for anybody interested to adopt. So that's the hope, if you want. That's the expectation. The test well that is going to be used for this demo is a well the data provided by Aker BP. It was a difficult well that they had issues, with whole cleaning and getting stuck, etc. And we'll try to bring all this up in this demo. The core functionality of the demo, the use case, what we call the use case, is ROP optimization when we hit a hard stringer. So the system is drilling under all the different advisors providing input. Then it hits a stringer and it has to adjust how to enter the stringer, how to drill through it, and how to exit. All the time trying to optimize the rate of penetration under the constraints that we have, in terms of hole cleaning, etc. So I think it's an excellent first step to try to put together all the pieces and bring up the questions. It's not an end, but it's a step on the way, and I really look forward to that work. There is an abstract that we try to now separate from that. there is an abstract that we have been discussing in the advisory board for a position paper, again, to submit to the drilling conference next year on the value of interoperability. So not going into the technical details, the interfaces, etc., but why we're doing this, what we expect to get out of this. And there were some very good discussions going on, but I don't think there was enough time for us to put together a proper abstract and submit. Matt maybe can give some more details here, but I think this is something that we can't drop, and we have to continue that effort going forward. And I have a separate slide, a suggestion here, how to carry this forward. Any questions on this update here?
Yeah, just a question about drilling contractors. How are the drilling contractors involved in this, since presumably when it's adopted, it's actually going to connect to their systems?
For the demo, you mean, or for the whole DWIS effort?
Oh, just for implementation.
So this here is case by case, I think, the answer, John. From my perspective, some drilling contractors have their own ADCS systems. Some of them, they use a commercial ADCS system from a vendor. Just for reference, ADCS is Automated Drilling Control System. That's the acronym, ADCS. So they can ask in case they develop their own ADCS system, if they are interested in these capabilities, in this functionality here, they can adopt what DWIS is developing, you know, the standard interfaces, the framework, etc., without changing the algorithms that they run inside. The DWIS is offering, let's say, the hooks, how to exchange data, but it doesn't go into the details of what to do with that data, you know, that is proprietary. Now, if a drilling contractor is using a commercial system, for example, like Novos or Deal from HMH, then they are the client in that case. And they can ask their supplier to support the functionality that DWIS is developing. And in that case now, if there is enough demand, the vendor, Novos or whoever, Enovi, they have a decision to make whether they will accept or adopt this or no. So they are a key player in this whole picture. The contractors as vendors or as clients of ADCS suppliers, you know. And the same question goes for, I think, for operators. Even though they are not directly involved developing any of this, if there is value and reduced cost and more efficiency, they can drive the whole food chain from the top down. Contractors, service companies, ADCS vendors, and everybody else, you know. And in a way, this is what we're trying to capture in this paper that we tried to put together, you know. What are the benefits from all different angles, you know, from each one of the players of going down that road? Why should we look into interoperability? In my opinion, so what I'm thinking at least is that if we can come up with a few case studies and show the cost of doing things the way we do today, mobilizing equipment, recommissioning, taking that equipment out, a new provider comes in and you have to go through that same cycle, you know. There is a cost to that, and someone is paying for that. If we can break that down and show that this can be reduced now, but using interoperability, I think that's going to be a very useful example. Now, interoperability doesn't come for free. It has its own costs. So we have to find that balance there. And in my opinion, I think there is a benefit to be gained. There is, of course, an investment that needs to be made, but there is value on the other end. And I'm not sure we have today a clear picture of that. We're driving this effort mostly from a technical perspective, but we need more evidence, more buy-in from the decision makers in in order to get the adoption that we want. Otherwise, it's going to stay an abstract exercise that shows, something that can be done technically, but it's going to be slow again for adoption and commercial success. And we don't want that, we have gone through this story for 20 years now with the broader drilling automation effort. So that's the thinking there. I'll come back in a next slide, a couple of slides later, about this paper that I think we need some support, some help here to put this together. And it's going to be across all different sub-segments of the industry. It's not going to be one single perspective. And I think there is interest, but we don't have the resources and the time right now. So let me come back to that. Any other questions? Yeah, I think there's a hand. Matt, please.
Yeah, so in terms of the advisory board, there's really, we've been debating the issues that we face moving this, progressing interoperability. And there's really two things that have risen to the top that is the bulk of our bi-weekly conversation. The first one is how do we define value, right? This is one of those value cases where it's the value is in action rather than inaction, right? So it's very difficult to create a value case based on inaction. So we're exploring how to do that as well as how to fully support and easily demonstrate value cases for these systems. And then the second one is really around matching or collecting the stakeholder needs. And we are looking at service provider, contractor, operator, right? And there's obviously some connect the dots that we have to do in order to get these systems built into how we work. So those are really the two main efforts that we're thinking about now, which again, as Dimitrios said, we were hoping to put into an abstract, but I think right now we still have to distill some of these concepts to a level that is a little bit more easy to articulate and demonstrate.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt. Yeah. Calvin, you have a comment?
Did I? No, I didn't want you to comment on my background. No, I didn't bring up a question.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Matt.
Since you gave me the floor, I did attend the meeting. Was it 2 days ago? And was really impressed actually with how quickly they've come along and built the team out. So in September, I'm very excited to see what's going on. Obviously, my interest is on the hull cleaning side, so I'm curious to see how that all plays out. So looking forward to it.
I can provide some more details about this demo and the participants and what components will be there. But I hope that this is gonna fuel the discussion and the interaction in this effort.
Yeah, that was one of the questions I had, right? Was the GUI, the dashboard, how they were, Eric was, I guess, intrigued by how we're going to show interoperability from a performance perspective. You remember that point?
Yeah.
So when an audience is looking at this?
Yeah, I think I follow. I mean, there are different goals for this demo. Interoperability. That's from the definition of the word. In order to show that, you would have to take the same advisor and go drive a different ADCS, which would be a different rig, without making any changes. And now you can show, okay, you see what the interface works, and I have a portable system that I don't have to customize every time I'm moving around. That's one benefit of interoperability. Now, I don't think we're going to show that in this demo because we don't have, the variety of platforms or rigs, etc. But the different benefit, which is more on the technical side, if you want, is how do you make sure that all these pieces work together without creating a train wreck? I think that the demo will help in that direction. And I'm not sure. I'm sure that we don't have the answers to all questions, but at least we have a platform that we can use to play and explore and ask the right questions before we can come up with the right answers. Today, as far as I know, everything is done in a centralized way. There is the ADCS that is in charge, if you want, of what's happening. And if you have external actors, there is no way to make sure that all these things work in a harmonious way. And that's the direction we need to look at, because that's the benefit of an open system where you can have different advisors coming in, instead of having a closed system where you are forced to use my advisor, the one that I provide with my ADCS system. I think that's where the discussion becomes, some commercial aspects come into the discussion, and that's why that open protocols and open standards that we're proposing will help, create a level playing field for all competitors to come in. But for that to happen, you need to ensure that all the pieces work together and one doesn't step on the other, So, it's it's going to bring up, the discussion will be much more live, I think, after the demo, and people will hopefully want to participate for the next phase. We'll see. Any other comments before we continue? Okay.
Hey,
Right.
Demetrios, I don't know if anybody mentioned it. The abstract deadline is going to get extended a couple weeks for the drilling conference. Your comment down on the bottom there about like initial discussions, that there may be a little bit more time if they want to get an abstract in.
So we have some more time to do it. Okay. I think, thank you. I think maybe I haven't checked the latest date. I think the original date was today, but if we have 2 weeks, maybe we can put something together.
The SP hasn't announced it yet, but they are planning to extend the deadline. I don't remember if it's 2 weeks or what, but there will be a little more time.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
I'm just curious why.
Why what? Why the extension?
Extending? Yeah, it seems to be universal now. Everything's getting extended.
Do you work on deadline? And you only get things done on the day that it's due. I think they figured that's the entire oil field these days.
This year things are looking better than last year in terms of just submissions. Last year the initial deadline came and there were very few papers in, but there's quite a few more. But I wouldn't plan on more than a 2-week extension.
Let me share a parenthesis here. Let me share with you a funny story about deadlines, So 20 years ago, when I was new still in the industry, working as engineer on a rotary steerable tool, we had a very tight deadline that we were working with. And as engineers, we were pushing back to management, saying that it is impossible to meet the deadline. We cannot have this goal met by that day. So how long? How much time you need? Was the question. We said we need 2 months extra. Okay, fine. So the deadline is moving earlier 2 months. And now, if you run 2 months late, we're going to finish on time. And that was said with straight face. It was not a joke, Close the parentheses here. I'm still laughing today when I'm thinking of that. Anyway, okay, let's move to the next slide. Rodika, please.
Yes, thank you, Dimitrios. And no deadline here in my slide.
Okay.
Yes, so as you mentioned, we got official now, since the charter was approved, and we are continuing with our tri-weekly meetings. We have meetings on Wednesdays, and the next one is June 28th. For those of you who'd like to join, you need to send me an email, and I will share the Teams link. And we're very happy. We have 2 new members, Michael and John, decided to join the discussions. And I must tell you that we have very good discussions, very engaged people in the team. And we're usually going above the time allocated for the meeting, which is good. Perfect. Well, I put here a short summary of the topics that we are currently discussing on. So we had quite a long chat on the focus for the verification and validation, and the fact that we verification and validation for sensor tools and individual automated functionalities. This is outside the scope which we define in the charter. What we want to focus in is the interplay of the different automated components, and basically to check that we have the consistency of the data and features necessary so that the different parts can work together. So if you think of the example from the DSATS that you had on the slide before, it's basically if you have a framework there that could check that all these pieces of the puzzle can work together and deliver the demonstration. So what is done now manually, because people are checking this, here we want to do it automatically. So basically we want to check, this is what I mean by consistency of data and features. So as I said, we are looking at this multi-agent architecture. So we don't consider one system, we consider systems of systems. And now we are discussing what are specific challenges related to this architecture and what are the challenges which we need to address in the verification and validation. And of course, we came across the importance of interoperability, not only in data, but also in features. And then we have discussed a bit of some algorithmic methods like semantic graphs. That was what was used in DSATS. And also, since we are wanted to discuss about functionalities in these graphs, we maybe want to extend to the next level, which is knowledge graphs. And we have this competence in the team. And at the same time, we are discussing relevant examples for verification validation for systems of systems and multi-agent automation system, which are out there. So if one of you want to share with us, or you know someone you could tip us on, just write me an email with the name. We are very happy if we get some information on this, because we would like to hear both from the experience with such system, but also challenges, what could not be possible to solve with existing technology or existing ways of doing things today. So here down I put a slide. This is just an image. I don't plan to go into detail, but just to show you that this is exactly from the meeting yesterday where we started discussing. So basically, if you have different components, and we chose an example with ROP optimization, this is so popular. And so for each of these components, we would need to look into what type of input data, what kind of information we want to capture in the framework for the input data, for the required features that we want are needed for one of these parts to be able to be run, and also what kind of output data, how to describe what it comes out of this. So I give an example here with the ROP optimization. Let's say I have two functionalities providing ROP optimization, and I choose to use number one, but this is dependent of someone else in the system offering safe operating envelopes, for instance, and also for detection isolation and safe mode management. So this information needs to be captured into the description of one party. So this is what we are working now, how to do that in an agnostic way, so that we can build up this knowledge graph where we can queries and ensure the consistency of the data and features. So this is just an overall, we are in the beginning. So when I go more in detail, I will present more details on this. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Rodica.
Rodica, based on what you heard on my last comment about the DWIS September 19th, what am I trying to say? Mock-up or demonstration, excuse me. Is there any GUI opportunities here, dashboard opportunities for interoperability? I'm looking at your bullet point number 4, importance of interoperability for V&V.
You're thinking our approach?
Yeah.
Or
yeah. Is there what you're doing here? Is there any way to marry or go in parallel to what they're doing or support what they're doing?
So it goes in parallel with what they are doing, but not. We are not addressing interfaces here. So this is so the picture which I have here on the bottom right is more for us to discuss on the structure for the framework. So we're not discussing at the level of interfaces as in graphical user interfaces.
But there's still an architecture, right? I mean, the demo, all the elements have this architecture, obviously, to run.
Yes. So if you think that the previous example with the devis, we could use that as a use case for us when we are more advanced and we manage to define such a framework. If we manage to define such a framework, because it's not an easy task, then we could use that in a use case. And let's say I have all these pieces together and I want my verification and validation framework to come up with it. If I ask a query, are the data consistent so that I can run these parties together? I can get a yes or no, and to what extent. And the same when it comes to features. So that's the say the synergy part. But of course, we are at early stage. We just started this work, and while they are been working on the devis for quite some time now, so there is a bit mismatch when it comes to the level where we are.
Can I add a couple of comments, Rodica?
Please.
So think, for example, about the auto drillers, which is a rather mature product out there. People are familiar with, You have an auto driller, let's say on rig A, that is using measurement A, B, C, and is trying to provide some output, controlling the weight or the RPM or whatever it does, Now, what happens if one of the sensors that provides data for that auto driller in that rig A fails, let's say? That data stream, that input goes away. How does the whole module react? Does it give up and it passes control back to the driller, or it has a way to use an alternative input, or what does it do? And that contained all these questions, come with that block. Now, if you go to the next rig that has a different auto driller from a different vendor, either from the rig itself or from the equipment provider, that second auto driller, it may behave in a different way. When it may use, the same sensor or slightly different measurement, and when something goes wrong, it reacts in a different way. So how do you put all these different versions or the different modules in a framework and make sure that they all work together? You have, for example, an auto driller working together with someone that is trying to downlink, a steering advisor, together with someone else that is trying to optimize hole cleaning. And you want to take these components now and make them portable from rig to rig to rig. When the behavior underneath changes, So that's part of the bigger verification and validation challenge that we are facing here. How do you make sure that each piece does what it's supposed to do and it doesn't collapse? And if it does, it gives warnings and time for reaction, and take all this and plug it together to build a working system, I think that's the challenge. And in the group with Rodica, we're not trying to focus on specific application and try to solve a specific problem, but we're trying to build a framework.
Right.
What are the questions that need to be answered, and what each one of those providers have to think about when they put out there a system like this, that potentially will become a little Lego piece in a bigger construct. So it's a very interesting challenge, and maybe we haven't faced it yet, but I think it will come for sure.
If I may just step in before Robert asks his questions, just to go back to to your original question about interface, graphical user interfaces. This will be helpful because you see I have this output data part. So if you manage to build such a framework, then one could potentially read all this output data and features and plot that into a graphical user interface. So it is helpful into that line. Yes.
I think we hit a nerve here, Rüdiger. Robert, you go first.
Just a quick one. I'm thinking maybe in terms of if each piece of equipment or anything else that's being reviewed by one of these systems is given maybe more of a compatibility thing. Are you thinking it should be across the board pass or fail completely? Or are you thinking of levels of compatibility with different systems? That's really my question.
And it's an extremely relevant question. And I thought a bit about that because let's say, for instance, one of this optimization, it requires some features and you don't have all those features available. Should you run that in reduced mode in a way, or should you not run it at all? And what would be the extent of the reduced mode that you allow it to run? So I think we will soon come into that. So now,
there was a suggestion yesterday in yesterday's call from Fred Florence related to that, Robert. And Fred said that typically you have components having a heartbeat to show basically that they are alive and to show that the communication is working. And those are either black or white, either the system is there and responding or it's not. But that heartbeat can be gray. It doesn't have to be black and white, So the system can indicate how robust it is, with the data that it has access, and if channels are missing, and if the output that it provides can be trusted and used reliably or no, So having a heartbeat is similar to what you are describing as a quality indicator, to show that the system is running, not necessarily full compatibility, but is running at, in a probabilistic way, using more data or less data. And the output that it provides, you can have low confidence or high confidence in it as you use it downstream, for control purposes or for other applications. So yes, absolutely. What you are saying is a valid point. The compatibility as well as the quality of the output. All that can be quantified.
Yeah. Let me discuss the heartbeat thing with Fred offline sometime, okay? The quality, I think, is a different issue. But one of the things I've seen from the start is that I felt the ADCSs will have different levels of ability, either a very basic functionality and everything else. And I think that's maybe along the lines of the capabilities here that Rüdiger is referring to. So we'll discuss it another time.
Thank you. Michael.
I just want to follow up on that. There's some discussions going on in Clinton's group and in Mark Carrier-Loy's group that also relates to this. Okay, we'll talk about it later.
Okay, thank you, Fred. Michael, please go ahead.
Yeah, just a question here. We're talking about validation pieces from my aspect. You say consistency of data. So how is this, for having any type of validation against what? So, and what to me, that has to tie back to a agreed data model that has to exist for each and every rig and services, and because otherwise what are you validating against? So if I it's okay to call something top drive torque and the other applications torque, but they have to be mapped together. There has to be existing data model, and I'm just checking, for this to work, there has to be somebody working on a data model. Where's that coming from? The universal data model.
Yes and no. It's a very relevant question, but the answer is not as direct, I would say, because and there have been initiatives, for instance, on checking on consistency of data without a data model, because you can check the variation between, let's say, you have several different values for one, like you had the torques, or if you have hook loads, several different values. So you can check there are mathematical methods to check that this data is consistent. You cannot say something about the source of inconsistency and so on, but you can check if it is consistent. So it gives you a first input on the validation part. So of course it depends. So as you see, I haven't put validation of the data. We check consistency of the data. So it means that, and the same with the features. So it means that they are all doing the same. Of course, it might be that they are all wrong. So, and then you might need to look at some other type of data, but you have that information. So you just want to have irregularities in the data that you have at your disposal.
That's where I see a challenge in this, is that's fine, except that if you're talking about interoperability, you've got to understand what data I am reacting to.
That's where the semantics comes in, Michael.
Yeah, but is that going to be a standard data model that's going to be used throughout the industry? Because if you don't have that, this becomes very difficult on a scalability standpoint. And the reason I bring this up is this ties in with OSDU, with WITS-ML, not WITS-ML. Some people are going down other paths, especially on the rig control side, are going a very different direction still. So I'm having quite a concern if we all don't talk the same language, it gets very complex in doing any of this. I mean, it's one of the, when you do first thing you start down the path, let's say OPC-UA in other industries, first thing they do is get a data model that's agreed to.
Okay.
So it's a valid point. So right now, as I said, and we have discussed a bit also in the team yesterday. Should we assume that as a first use case, should we say that we have DEVIS compatibility and we take it from there and look at specific task and then go back and say, okay, what if we don't have DEVIS? And there where your comment comes to. So it really depends what we want to focus as. Of course, we cannot focus on the full chain from the start, so we will need to divide this. But it's a very valid point you have. So I agree with you. So we will have to have some consistency.
I suggest, Rodrigo, we take this point back to the group to discuss and then maybe come back to Michael in the next meeting or something, but so for the sake of time, so we don't.
Yes, of course. And of course, you are welcome to the meetings if you want to come and discuss.
Thank you.
Calvin.
The question I got, maybe for Michael and some of on the operator side, that if you're familiar with the, I can never say this Norwegian company's name, Exabenus, right? So I listened to their poster talk in Abu Dhabi a couple weeks ago, and it's a machine learning black box that does ROP optimization. And they state that it can basically go on any rig anywhere. Now, I didn't ask them if this is a data model or a physics-based model. I think maybe that's why I heard Michael ask about data models. But and my original question is, how does a machine learning algorithm get validated or verified if it's a data model and not a physics model?
We have Serafima here on the call. So who is with Exabenus? So maybe she can give us some input.
Well, I guess not necessarily maybe on the validation part, but towards your question, it is a data-driven model, yes. So I think we are using some of the physics and state detection, to eliminate different scenarios, right, and to kind of to look more into this scenario, what is happening, but overall it is looking into the trends of the data, right? And that's why it can work without large amounts of contextual data, which is needed, because it just looks in the trend. And the trend, for example, well, we're also looking at the stack pipe so the trend for a stack pipe, it's the same, irrelevant of which of the formation. So, and the same goes with the ROP optimization. So, but towards the validation, I guess that's, I don't have an answer. I need to think about how that could be validated, because I guess.
I can comment on that if you want. So usually in machine learning, there are different techniques, algorithmic techniques based on queries and counterexample that you can query that model and get some internal information of the inner working of that machine learning algorithm. It, of course, depends on the machine learning algorithm, but there are such techniques. So for instance, if you would like to get some about the features, you could implement, of course, you could implement such algorithms to get out that information. So there are methods, but of course they have their own, their limitations. You cannot get out everything, because there are quite some machine learning algorithms which also have big chunks of black box in it. So again, but of course, and this is a valid point, and we will need to consider, because now with the extent of machine learning being used in different parts, in different functionalities, we should consider some of these systems being machine learning based system, and how do we include that into the validation, verification validation process. And this is something that we address in this team.
Okay, one last comment in this section, Fred.
Calvin, just to be clear, this group is looking for data interoperability, compatibility of communication, and understanding of the data. We don't care if the model's worth a damn or not. The market will make that choice.
Okay, thank you, Fred. This is a topic we haven't exhausted by any means, but we have to continue that discussion offline, I think, separately. All right, so let's move on to the next one. So Drillbotics, Sasi is not here. This is the same summary that I had in the last call, but now in June is when the competition is. So Fred, maybe you can give us some latest update, please.
June the 29th, we will have the Group A competition. There are two schools, one from Ghana, one from Norway. It will be online. And on July the 6th, we will have a hybrid meeting. The university from Germany will go to Belgium, and TUC and UMINES will set up and do the Group B test.
Very good. Anything about the documentary, Fred?
David's working on it. He's going to put a lot of work into it. He's probably going to put another $30,000 or more of his own money into it, and he's going to try to make a really nice documentary that he can submit to some independent group to show the kind of quality that he's doing. So we're going to reap the benefit of his vision.
Okay.
So I think that's great. The other thing to say is that next year we're going to look at changing the content of the competition, the challenge of the competition. And anybody who has ideas and energy, we will ask you to join us.
When does that start? Immediately after this year's competition, Fred?
Yeah, we'll start conversations that time, and we have to have something kind of nailed down by the end of August.
Okay. Thank you, Fred. Okay, so the next slide, combining the two topics, I got an update from Roman, who is on a plane right now, flying back to Calgary. So on the OSDC, there is some work going on benchmarking the models that have been submitted. You can see there the update I just copied from Roman. And there is a group of people that are working with these interns, trying to go through these different codes, different models as they have been submitted in the OSDC. And on the university side, given the current situation, with the drop in reduction in enrollment, etc., Roman is working with colleagues and other professors and other connections that he has, and he offered to give us a more detailed update where that stands in the next call, which is going to be, I guess, in August. So that's
Demetrios, I just add one thing. Emmanuel de Tournay has a student, Hay, that is put his code out as well. He has a drill string dynamics code. So his code is there. We have our code is approved to be released on our latest versions of the ExxonMobil code. And it's a couple drill string dynamics model. So, and that's some of the things that Lance Endres is going to be having his interns compare against those two codes plus some others.
Thank you. Paul. Very good. I cannot really answer more questions here, but that's where we stand on that front.
Okay, and one last really quick thing that Roman probably hasn't even seen it yet, but I agreed on June the 20th at 9:30 to 11. I'm going to give a lecture on drill string dynamics. This is the standard lecture that we talk about internally for training within ExxonMobil, and that's going to be open. That's going to be available to the open source drilling community.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you, Paul. Okay, so the last slide here in this section is coming back to the position papers that I mentioned earlier. So the second one, let me start with the second one because we kind of covered it already, is what we discussed in the DWIS, the benefits of interoperability, etc. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this. The first one you see here on this slide, during the symposium we had in Stavanger in March, one topic that was repeated again and again and again was, the business model, the business benefits, the lack of, clarity, why automation doesn't move faster, etc. So one suggestion that came up offline, was instead of, rehashing the same complaints about the lack of business drivers, etc., why don't we look at it from the opposite side? Why don't we look at success stories of drilling automation and try to find out what are the common factors, if there are any, that led to this success? Was the scope, was the time, was availability of resources, was business benefits, or a combination of all those? What was it that made those case studies successful? And try to publish that information and share it with the industry and learn from that. So we discussed with Calvin how we go about this, and Calvin approached Linda at IADC to see if the drilling contractor, the magazine, would be willing to help with this study, because they can do the surveys, they can ask the questions, they have more, let's say, weight than us. So Linda looked at it and internally talked to the right people, and then they came back and they very kindly deferred, and they thought that was not the right time for them to do it. So the question really is there a way for us to do that as DSATS? Can we find the right people, the right volunteers, and do this work and identify those successful cases and talk to the right people and capture that information in a paper? Is there value in such position paper, and do we have the bandwidth to do that? So that's a question really I'm posing to the group. I don't know if Calvin wants to give us any details about the discussion he had with Linda.
You summed it up well. I had basically asked for like a whole piece being done and highlighting folks. She did volunteer or extend that if we started building some traction with, let's say, interviews or case histories, that we could go back to her and talk through the piece that we're trying to build. But yeah, they just have higher priorities. They have limited resource. That's basically what it was. But she thought it's a good idea. Just they've got their own, what's the word? I don't know what the literal terms are for writing stuff, publishing timelines and things that they've already got. So I think if we showed some traction or came up with the genesis of what we're trying to do, we might get some more support.
Yeah, following up on that, I think you might want to contact Steve Rassenfoss at JPT. He may be interested to do it. He's done a lot for DSATS in the past. He's normally reported on our symposiums, and he's done a lot on automation. I can't speak for him, but I think it would be worth trying to approaching him and see what he says.
That's a good suggestion, George. Thank you. Yeah. Any other input from anybody else?
Do we have people on this call that'll volunteer to be interviewed?
If anybody is interested, feel free to reach out, and we don't have to put everybody under the gun here in this call, but if that sounds interesting, please contact me or Calvin, and we build a team and we take it from there. Excellent. How are we doing on time? We have 15 minutes left. Okay. So moving on, the next last section here about the events that we have planned. Don't know if Deep is on the call, but we had the webinar on May 22, where Eric, Carlos, and John, they gave a presentation about the work that they are doing on the DQUD. Description is the last word. I watched it offline after the event. I think it was interesting, very interesting. Now, going forward, we have 3 more spots for the year. There is an SPE Live on August 30, and we have 2 more webinars later in the year. And we don't have volunteers for this yet. We haven't assigned. So those are open spots. I'd like to invite anyone who has a good story to tell to contact. Back a few calls ago, Tony Pink had made a suggestion that we compile all the story, the evolution of drilling automation, where we started, I don't know, 20 years ago, how the first few systems, I don't know, auto drillers, etc., started, top drives maybe. Mechanization came up with a big promise. Then this hasn't really taken off. What we learn from this, what are the next steps, building blocks, trying to build a picture, basically, from a puzzle, where we have the different pieces, how they fall in place, how is the picture looking today, and what are the gaps, where are things missing, So that sounds like a worthy exercise, but due to the lack of bandwidth, we haven't really gone very far with that, So that's something that is in the pipeline, but like the position papers there, we just need people to actually spend the time to put all the information together, So even though it's a suggestion, it's an idea, it's not concrete enough to be put on a schedule like this, So it's an open invitation here for anyone who has a case study or a new technology or something to share, to nominate themselves, Alternatively, we can use some of the people that Paul has nominated for the community calls to assign them one of these webinars and share their story, So that's where we are on the events. There is the special session that we have on, we're planning for the ATCE. I'm not sure if Austin is here. So I can speak up a little bit for what he's doing. So he has had the meetings with the committee the last month, like 2-3 meetings. There is a list of potential panelists that we have identified, all very known names in the area. Remember, this is a joint session with the geothermal technical session. The format is going to be rather condensed. I think we have an hour, if I'm not mistaken. And it's going to be a panel discussion and social interaction at the same time. Right now, the status is reaching out to the panelists and trying to assemble the team and make them get the commitments. for the session. It's
Yeah,
going to be a ticketed event.
Yeah, it won't be a panel. It'll be experts who we're reaching out to now, standing at a cocktail table, having shared their one slide template of their background, and then people coming to it will go connect with them and have a discussion with them. So he's calling it DSATS Connect, and it's more of a networking event.
Okay.
So just 1 hour, couple of drinks with tickets, and then go and meet people at tables. There was an IADC Australasia group that showed they'd done this on LinkedIn, and it was apparently very successful. So young people appreciate the opportunity to go and talk to people with the expertise.
Thank you, John. So that's I can try to have more details from Austin for the next update. That's where it is. I think we're going to be soon. I think it's going to go on the website because there's only 3 months left. If anyone has any questions or comments, etc., please feel free to reach out to Austin. I'm sure he would welcome any suggestions or ideas. And that brings us pretty much to the end of the presentation. This is the last slide. Usually I haven't changed it the last couple of times. I think the topics here, the bullets are the same. We need to reach out to new disciplines, new areas that will become relevant in our drilling automation domain. Interaction with IADC and other entities that can help with creating guidelines always is a relevant point. And then our next call is going to be a community call next month, July 23. If you want to mark that on your calendar, the invitation will come 2 weeks approximately before we have the latest roster of members. And that's pretty much it for today. It was a good discussion. I think at times we had to cut short. I think I look forward to some feedback from all of you regarding the position papers or some of the topics we discussed. Feel free to reach out about the data model, etc., or reach out to the leaders of the different activities. It's a healthy sign to have this discussion, I think. And before we go, if anybody has any closing comments. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you. I see a couple of hands. Yeah, Mark, please.
Yeah, Mark has his hand up.
Yeah, so I had a quick question for Fred regarding the student competition. There's bad back echo. There was a student competition by the other technical section that they started up. Is there any thought about combining the two again? I had to go at it, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and it failed. But I wondered if we could try it again.
Thanks, Mark. We did reach out to that group to try to work together, and they didn't want to work together. They wanted a specific plan. So we certainly can reach out with them again.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Fred. John?
Yeah, I was just thinking that it's June already, and it may be time to start thinking about the March 2024 event in Galveston for DSATS. If we want to get some interesting speakers, we're really going to have to start early. And I was also wondering if it's maybe an opportune time to go back to a format we did in 2016, where we had 3 keynote speakers from outside the industry. Seems we haven't done that for a while. Of course, they take lead time to get. I mean, we had Sheridan, Mike, and Alonso Vera. So we had NASA and Disney, and well, Sheridan, of course, is himself. And I was just wondering if that's a format people would think would be useful again, and if so, who might the people from outside the industry be that would come to Galveston and talk on something?
That's a good suggestion, a good idea. I like the concept of outside experts because I think we have a lot to learn from aviation as we go into interoperable systems and sensor redundancy and multi-agent system of systems, etc. That would be interesting, but thank you for bringing it up. Anybody else? In that case, I think we can close here. Thank you for taking the time, and I look forward to working with each one of you in the calls, DWIS calls, etc. in between. If any questions, suggestions, please feel free to reach out. Thank you again. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.